Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Breaking the 3D. I believe this is episode 12, if I'm not mistaken, and I believe that this is my 30th video. I started making these videos about 2 years ago, and about a year ago I changed the name of the channel to Breaking the 3D, as I wanted to sort of have a more spiritual approach to the videos that I was making, and sort of try to adhere to this concept of breaking the 3D. It's actually funny, something's coming to me right now, because part of the topic for this video is going to be about how we receive affirmations and messages from higher powers, but a lot of us don't even realize that we're receiving them. But I'm convinced personally that we're all receiving messages all the time from higher sources, but what it is we think they're just our own thoughts, but they're not our own thoughts. There's something more. And I will touch base later about how we can kind of decipher like what are our own thoughts and what might be like a higher message that we're actually receiving, that's being sort of transmitted to our mind. Kind of the way that, the quote that I always cite from Tesla about how, his mind is only a receiver. And that's true for all of us. A good way to think about it is kind of like Wi-Fi and a router. Like the router receives the Wi-Fi and transmits the signal. Like in a similar way, like our brains are kind of like the router. We receive the signals, and then we're able to understand the signal, and our brains, translate the signal that we're receiving into a conscious thought. So anyhow, I was asking some people close to me, if they like my videos, what I could do moving forward, if they had any suggestions. And they said, they wanted to hear more about like my personal story and stuff that happened to me. So I do want to share a quick story with you guys, because I think that it's relevant, and that's going to tie into a concept that I want to talk about, which I do think I've touched on in the past, but it was a video that I made at the beginning of when I started making these videos almost 2 years ago. So many of you may have not even seen that video. And I do think that this is a very important concept. So anyway, as many of you guys know, I was in a car accident back in 2018. Unfortunately, there was sort of a lot of fallout from that accident that has continued on for many years. Even up until recently, about 5 months ago now, I had a surgery when I was traveling in Thailand that was related to the accident. Thank God I'm okay now, and I'm doing much better. But anyhow, the story that I want to share occurred, I believe it was around like 2021 or 2022. I think 2021. In 2021, in short, I ended up in the hospital with gallstone pancreatitis, which I believe was related to the surgery that I had from the car accident, where they removed part of my intestines. And that kind of rewired my intestinal tract and then led to some other side effects down the road. And these gallstones forming in my gallbladder, I believe, was one of the side effects of the surgery. So anyhow, one of these stones had become trapped, and it was cutting off access to my pancreas, or the flow between the pancreas and the gallbladder. And then the pancreas became inflamed, and that's how this gallstone pancreatitis ensued. So anyhow, they treated me at the hospital for about a week, and then they released me, and they recommended very strongly that I have my gallbladder removed, which I did later on. I think that this happened before I went for the surgery to have the gallbladder removed, but I was feeling very upset that I had gotten sick, and I asked myself, I was standing right over here in my kitchen, and I asked myself in my mind, I said to myself, why did I get sick? And surprisingly, I received back an answer, because this type of thing hadn't happened to me before. I didn't just like ask questions and then get answers, like at least not succinctly as the answer that I got here. So I asked this question in my mind, you know, why did I get sick? And I got back the answer, an overall imbalance, which immediately I took as meaning more than just like a physical imbalance. I sort of thought that it was kind of like an all-encompassing imbalance in my life, meaning physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, etc. Like just my overall being was out of balance. And part of that was my diet and what I was putting in my body, but other aspects of that were non-physical. And then immediately after receiving this message in my mind of an overall imbalance, I received another message which said, we are all creating the reality that we are experiencing. And that was the first time that I became familiar with this concept, which I later have found in many different spiritual contexts, in publications and on the internet. So I found it very fascinating that this was kind of like a well-known affirmation or concept within the spiritual community, that we were all creating the reality that we were experiencing. And if any of you guys are familiar with Bashar, you know, who's being supposedly channeled by this gentleman named Daryl Anka, he talks about this concept a lot. But what I realized is that this concept is really true, because basically the way to think about it is that we are all, as human beings, we are all sort of like reality. We are all our own little reality filter. We are filtering the reality that we're experiencing. Kind of like a lens will filter light, you know, and every lens might filter light slightly differently, depending on the thickness of the lens, the color of the lens, etc. So we as human beings are, you know, filtering the reality that we're experiencing, but we're also creating it, because think about it, you're creating your reality through your thoughts, feelings, beliefs, and actions. So you choose what to eat every day. You choose when to go to bed, when to wake up. You choose who you date or who you marry. You choose whether or not to have children. You choose where you live. You choose what type of house you want to live in. You choose what type of clothes to wear, what type of shoes to wear, what type of movies to watch, what type of music to listen to. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. All of these things are creating the reality that you experience. You know, like just as a minor example, let's say I want to go snowboarding this winter, and I go snowboarding for 3 days in Vermont, right? I've created that experience for myself. Nobody else created that for me. I created that, you know? And when you look at the big picture of your life, all of these decisions that you've made have created the reality that you are experiencing. I'll end with this because I do want to keep these videos shorter. When I was a child, there was a few basic things that my parents told me. And one thing that they used to say that always stuck with me, they used to say, life is a series of choices. And I feel like that is so true. And those series of choices determine your reality. And that's why the choices that we make are so important, and why we all have to be making good choices for ourselves so that we can create the best reality for ourselves possible, and the reality that we most prefer. So I hope you guys have a good night, and please let me know if you guys have any questions or any suggestions for future videos. I hope to see you guys again soon.